Sheikh Toad said to you. My name is Tabari Zahir. I, I am a licensed clinical therapist, and that's like my main job. All right, I talk to people about their problems, and so Alhamdulillah, I'm honored that people let me into their lives and ask me to assist them, to overcome stumbling blocks. We have created this nonprofit, this organization called Lamps of Light Project. And it is a behavioral health organization that is focused on, helping Muslims in 3 ways. So we have 3 pillars of service. The very first thing is what I'm doing right now, psycho-spiritual, community engagement, coming out and, talking about, how, Muslims can improve not only their spiritual health, but also their psychological health using Islamic principles. So that's the first pillar of service, is this community engagement. The second thing that we do is we have a peer-to-peer mentor service, right? Like if you all of you who have children, you have kids, for sure you're worried about them, right? You're looking at the environment, you're looking at what's happening in the world, you're looking down the road and you're saying, how am I going to help them? You help them by, creating environments and creating institutions that are focused on them. And one of the things that we try to do is, we bring youth into our organization who can then, but these youth have gone through things, right? Trauma, maybe. They've overcome, grief, sorrow, possibly addiction. They've overcome those things, and now they're coming back into the community to say, this is how it's done, right? So if we have somebody in college or somebody in high school, 16, 17 years old, I'll give you an example. A mother called me one time and she said, I found this vape machine in my son's room, right? Okay, he's 16. So in just a brief conversation, I can tell that he's not addicted, right? So he doesn't necessarily need professional treatment. But what he does need is, a peer, somebody just right around his age, a little bit older, a little bit more experienced. Say, listen, you don't want to go down that road. Don't do it. And I'm going to tell you why. These are 10 reasons why. I'm a credible messenger to you to explain to you. And that goes much further than browbeating him. And, it goes much further when you have somebody who speaks his language, has some of those similar experiences, and they've done vape before, and they could tell you, listen, you don't want to go down that road, right? So that's the second service that we try to provide. We take these youth who have these experiences, and we, try to shape them for providing the service to the Muslim community. The third thing that we do is we do have professional service. We have professional counseling. So I myself am a licensed clinician. Our brother Amin here, he's also a clinician with Lamps of Light. And we have another one up in the Bay Area. Her name is Mona. She's a PhD student at Palo Alto University. And we provide clinical services. If somebody needs professional help, whether it's at an individual level, whether it's at a couples, couples come in for couples counseling, or a family, we provide those services also. Having said all of that, we specialize in addictions, all right? And that's simply because I just realized probably about 5 years ago, kids are starting to have addictions. There's no fault of their own. I'm not talking about drugs and alcohol. I'm talking about to these devices, all right? To these devices. And, we have to figure out ways of helping them, all right? I'm also the IOK Muslim chaplain at UCLA. We've got about 1,000 Muslims on campus, 1,000 Muslim kids on campus. And if you have 50 of them coming and saying to you, I'm struggling with pornography, that means really it's 500 of them, right? So it really became clear to me, like, we really, really have to do something. And so Lamps of Light was born out of that. And so, alhamdulillah, this is what we're about. Minimally, inshallah, what I would ask you all to do inshallah, is just sign up for our monthly newsletter where we send out, information every month about, different types of engagements that we have, or, different psycho-spiritual remedies for the community, things like that. And so we want to get this message out to as many people as we can, especially in Southern California. All right. So inshallah, what I want to talk to you today about is trauma and spirituality. Trauma and spirituality. And the reason why I find that this topic is very, very important is because there's a misunderstanding a lot of times in our community about how to help someone to overcome different type of struggles. All right. And what I want to do is I want to show you very clearly, directly from the Quran and directly from the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that there is, we need wise counselors, right? We need these Muslim therapists, especially the ones who have been trained in the Islamic sciences, who then go on and learn, about, the psychology, human psychology, so that they can, be helpers, healers. So to give you an example, I want to start with the hadith of the man who killed 99 people, right? Most of us are familiar with this hadith, right? He killed 99 people. Authentic hadith. So I'm going to tell it to you how it was narrated in the hadith. Then I'm going to come back and put a clinical lens on it. All right, a clinical lens. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told his companions that there was once a man, he killed 99 people. It's a lot of people. I know people who have killed people, right? Like, I know people. And it's harrowing to hear how it happened, what they suffered afterwards. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us about a person, he killed 99 people. He goes to his people and he says, who is the wisest amongst you? And they indicate to him a monk. So he goes to the monk and he says, I have killed 99 people. Is there hope for me? The monk tells him, no, there's no hope for you. So he kills him. Kills him too. He goes back to his people and says, who is the wisest amongst you? They indicate another monk. So he goes to that monk and he says, I have killed 100 people. Is there any hope for me? Now, this monk we would consider him to be a knowledgeable worshiper. The first one was just a worshiper. The second one was a knowledgeable worshiper. So he's able to answer him correctly. So he says to him, who can tell you that there's no hope for you? But then he gives him a diagnosis. He says to him, you have to make tawbah. In essence, he's saying, I'm paraphrasing, but he's telling him, you have to make tawbah. You have to turn back to Allah. But he says, you must leave your people. You come from a bad people. Leave them and go and make your tawbah. So he sets out to make his tawbah. He dies on the way. The angels of wrath come for him, and the angels of mercy come for him. And they begin to argue amongst themselves. The angels of wrath, they say, he has done no good in his whole life. But the angels of mercy say, that doesn't matter. He was on the path of repentance. When he died, he belongs to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent another angel in the form of a human being to settle the dispute. And he says to him, he tells these two groups of angels, if he's closer to the place where he was going to seek repentance, he goes with the angels of mercy. But if he's closer to the place where he committed all of these crimes, he goes with the angels of wrath. And because of a miracle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shortened the space between where he was at and where he was going. So he was further away from the place where he committed the crimes. So the angels of mercy took him. I want you to think about something for a second. Number one, why did he ask his people, who's the wisest amongst you? Because he was in pain. You know how I know? Because I had to counsel someone who was in prison. He had killed someone, an innocent person, and that's not why he was in prison. He was in prison for drug charges, but he had actually killed someone. And while he was in prison, his conscience kicked in. He became Muslim in prison. His conscience kicked in and his health just started to decline because he realized the magnitude of what he did. Right? He just walked up to a bus stop and blew a woman's brains out so that he could be part of a gang. He began to develop stomach ulcers. He began to have many, many problems because he was in pain. Right? So that's the first thing we know. This man who killed 99 people, he was in pain. He's going to his people and is asking for help. They indicated a worshiper. So he goes to the worshiper and he asks the worshiper, is there any hope for me? And out of ignorance, the worshiper says no, which caused him to despair. This is the favorite tool of shaitan. Yes, to fall into despair. Right? So he kills him too. But he's still in pain. He's still searching for an out. So he goes and he asks again. And alhamdulillah, he found the wise counselor. Now I want to pause right here for a second and say, we have people like this in our community. We have people like this we have youth in our community that sometimes they go to their parents, sometimes they go to their imams, sometimes they go to the shuyukh, they go to community leaders, and they tell them, hey, I'm suffering from something. And then the worshiper, without knowledge many times, or not specializing in certain knowledge, gives them the wrong information and causes them to despair. What can be the wrong information? When somebody has an underlying problem and you tell him, pray more. Go and pray more. Or you tell him, read more Quran. And the reason why I'm saying that is I'm not saying we don't need more Quran. I'm not saying that. We all need more Quran. We all need more prayers. We all need more dhikr. We need that. But if someone has an underlying problem, many times more spirituality will lead them further astray. At the top of my list is shaitan. Don't forget, he was a worshiper of Allah in the beginning. But what did his worship do for him? It made him more and more and more arrogant because he had an underlying problem. If you need more proof, the companions of the Messenger of Allah, they come to him and they say, Ya Rasulullah, there's a woman in this neighborhood. She fasts all day and she prays all night, but she's hard and harsh to her neighbors. What did Rasulullah say about her? She's for the fire. So all of her praying and all of her fasting was doing her no good. Why? She had an underlying problem. And so if you misdiagnose, you can cause people more harm than good. This is very, very important. So when he goes to the second knowledgeable worshiper, the wise counselor tells him, yes, there's hope for you. You must make tawbah. But he diagnoses him. He begins to understand half of your problem is simply the environment that you came from. It's just the environment that you came from. Anybody from, maybe not today, back in the days, Watts or Compton or Brownsville, right? Or Old Block in Chicago, right? Or
don't forget about Detroit.
Detroit, right? These places, they will tell you about how your environment, it causes you trauma. And what happens? Hurt people hurt people. If you get hurt, you have to pour that pain out on other people. All right? And so the wise counselor is telling him, hey, I'm going to diagnose you. I understand the problem. You have to leave your place. And that way, by being correctly diagnosed, he found redemption. Okay? But his case was so bewildering that even the angels argued over, does he go to paradise or does he go to hell? Sometimes we have cases like that in our community. We don't, we hear what they're doing and we just say, astaghfirullah. You don't want to talk to him. You don't have anything to do with him. And then we say things to him or we treat him in a way that causes him to despair. All right? So this is what I am against. And, I am, telling the community that we have to do better. All right? We must do better. So the premise of this talk, right, is to demonstrate how traumatic events can impact the soundness of your deen. It can. Right? Your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right? How it affects your certainty. That's the premise of this talk. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to eliminate stigma. I want us to understand that we live in a time that humanity has never experienced. Humanity has never experienced what we're going through now, where you can hold a device in your hand and it delivers you news and information that contradicts your worldview in every single way. Every kufr you can think of, every type of disbelief, every type of hypocrisy, every type of lie, every type of twisted truth can be found here. And we haven't figured out how to deal with it. But we need to be genius. We need to be thinking of genius ways of helping our youth. Because the implications for our community 20 years from now rests on what we do now. If we don't help our youth, and I'm just speaking, in general terms, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yaf'alu ma yasha. Allah does what he wants. And this deen is his. Right? Allah can do what he wants. We're seeing all of these new people become Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can move us out of the way and bring new people. But what I'm saying is still valid. If we don't address these issues, it will have implications for all of the masajids, all of the community centers, all of the places of learning. And just to give you one example, let's just take pornography, for example. Many of our youth are wrestling with this, and it's not just the men. I'm telling you, it's not just the men. I have Muslim women clients also. What happens is they get this artificial understanding on what it's like to be intimate. And then they get married thinking it's going to be like that. And of course, we know it's not like that. And then problems in the marriage pop up. And we're all wondering why. Right? Or it comes out, one of them is addicted to pornography. And it has major implications, not only for their marriage, but for every community that these type of couples are in. It has major implications. So we have to be thinking deeply about how are we going to solve these problems. Okay? All right. Human beings have always had trauma. Always. You're not going to find any generation of human beings that did not experience some type of trauma. As a matter of fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in more than one place in the Quran, you're going to go through things. Right? وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوءِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ Allah tells us in the Quran. For sure, without doubt, we're going to try you with something of fear. What is anxiety? It's a type of fear. It's on the spectrum of fear, right? Khawf, wal-ju', hunger. Ask our brothers and sisters in Philistine about hunger, right? وَنَقْسٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ, a lessening of your wealth, whether it's property or cash or stocks and bonds or whatever. You're going to see it. Okay, وَأَنفُسٍ, you're going to lose family members. And family members are going to lose you. This is a fact of life no one can escape. So does trauma happen? Yes. But the problem is this. We live in a time where the support systems are no longer solid. Right? There were times when, you know, you lived in places where you had extended family. You had, you know, people who they were emotionally sound. They were spiritually sound. They were, you know, developed in ways that modernity cannot produce the wali. Why am I saying that? Because in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that these are the people who they don't have the two major diagnoses that in mental health, which is anxiety, worry about the future, or grief, sorrow for the past. These are the two. Ask any mental health clinician, they'll tell you that most people come in for one of these two things. But in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إِنَّ الْأَوْلِيَاءَ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَهُمْ لَا يَحْزَنُونَ. Those awliya, those intimate friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't have that anxiety about the future. Nor do they have that grief about the past. Because they are spiritually sound, they are present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Modernity, with all of its productivity, cannot produce that. It cannot. So we have to be thinking, how can we produce people like that? How do we do that? So there has always been trauma. There will always be trauma. And as a Muslim community, we have a lot to teach people about how to overcome this so that we can become sound human beings. All right? Because what trauma does is, in the same way that a physical wound will diminish your performance. It will diminish. If you break your ankle, you can't run as fast with a broken ankle, right? If you have a cut on your arm, you have to be careful about it. You're not going to interact with the world the way you used to. Psychological trauma is the same way. It diminishes your psychological capacity. Same thing. And if we don't give people help with that, they will have problems. It will show up in their marriages. It will show up in the community centers. You wonder why this brother's coming to the masjid acting like this, acting like that. You have no idea. His whole history is filled with trauma. And if you misdiagnose him, you may cause him more trauma. Right? Okay. So what is trauma becomes the next question. What is trauma? It can be any event that causes a psychological wound. Right? Usually it's like a sudden event. Happens really, really fast. And then, because when events happen really, really fast, you notice that people talk about time slows down. I remember one time I was in Oakland and a guy pulled out a gun. I was selling some stuff out of the car. And he walks up on me and he puts the gun right in my face. It tells me to break myself. Break yourself. The only thing, wallahi, I had thousands of dollars in my pocket, but in that split moment, I made a commitment. I wasn't giving him anything. right? Wallahi, I'm telling you the truth. Allah is my witness. What I'm saying to you is true. He put the gun in my face, and I was just looking at the barrel of the gun because he had it kind of low, because this is broad daylight. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There's cars driving by and everything. And he's looking around, but he's got the gun on me at his waist. And he's telling me, break myself. I'm looking at the gun and I'm like, oh man, this is about to hurt. This is getting ready to hurt because I wasn't going to cooperate, and I knew he was just going to smoke me. I knew it. And so I remember time just begins to kind of slow down, and I started to become aware of every single thing around me. Later on, after training and things like that, I realized what's actually happening is not going through your short-term memory, so you're not processing it. See, when it goes through the short-term memory, you process it. But when it happens really fast and it's like a traumatic event, it goes to your long-term memory. It's not processed. And what happens is later it keeps coming up, trying to get processed. So you might have dreams about it. Or you might have, you see somebody that looks like the guy, and then you have an emotional reaction to it. Right? Somebody has on the same jacket, and you have this fight or flight mode that you go into because it has gone into your long-term memory. Right? So our brother here, he has a young son. I'm sure you've seen him fall many times. He's hurt himself many times, right? If you take the time to just say, Beta, it's okay, right? It's okay, son, come on, it's okay. Everything is okay, you got a boo-boo, but it's okay now. See, that goes into his short-term memory. He's able to process it. And then it becomes wisdom. He learns from it, you see? Which is actually the reason why we go through these traumatic events. We're supposed to learn from them. But if you don't have anybody to tell you, it's okay, come on, let's get this, let's keep moving, let's go. It will stay with you. You'll have irrational behavior. You'll make many, many mistakes. And this was the wisdom that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam first received revelation, we know that he himself, he thought he was Majnun. He thought that. And he runs back to his wise counselor, Khadija radiallahu anha. And she comforts him. Zammiluni, zammiluni, he said, wrap me up, cover me, cover me. She covers him. She asks him what happened. He tells her what happened. And she said, do you fear that you are Majnun? Then she said, no, Allah would not do that to you. And she walked him through all the reasons why he could not be Majnun. Everybody does not have a Khadija. And so when they go through things, they suffer. And they might suffer for life. Okay? Unless they get someone that can help them to process that experience from their long-term memory into the short-term memory and expel it through the body. Because trauma is actually in the body. Right? It's a dysregulated nervous system. All right? So it could be an event like that. Big major events. It could be sexual assault. It can be, earthquakes, hurricanes, a sudden death of a loved one. All right, it can be all of these different things. And please tell me how much time I have, because we'll be here till 10 o'clock. All right, we'll be here till 10 o'clock. All right. Okay, I'm need that. But also listen, this is another thing that we have to be aware of. Trauma does not only come from major events. Trauma can come from neglect. Neglect. You see, children, they need two things all the time. Number one, affection. They need love. They need care. And their children will teach you that if you're paying attention. They'll constantly come to you for reassurance. They constantly come to you when they want hugs, they want kisses. They show you what they do so that you can say, look at you, mashallah, you did a good job. They need that. If they don't get it, that's a type of trauma. The other thing that they need is authenticity. Authenticity. What do I mean by that? If a child experiences abuse, for example, they have to push down who they are and how they really feel to please the caregiver. They cannot be authentic. They can never share with the caregiver what they really need, what they really mean, how they really feel, for fear of no longer being cared for. So they push themselves down. They suppress themselves so that the caregiver is happy with them. So let's just say that a parent has the habit of hitting the child, right? So the child will hide that impulse that they have. They have the impulse to do something, but they'll stop doing it for fear of being hit. And they never learn self-regulation. You see, the reason why you have to go slowly with children is so that they learn how to regulate themselves. It takes a long time, but it's supposed to. Because the parents are supposed to be learning at the same time as the children. But many times, it's not the children who need to learn, it's the parents. I'm telling you this from thousands of hours of clinical work, just working with families, working with people, working with couples. Sometimes they come, oh, it's my son, my daughter, and after you kind of like get through about 5 or 6 hours, it's like, no, actually, it's you. You never learned how to control your impulses. You never learned how to control your, you don't know how to regulate. And so you pour it down the throat of your child. And so the child never learns how to regulate, and then they begin to use other things to regulate themselves. This is why they use drugs. That's why they use alcohol. This is why they use these machines, because it gives them a feel good. It gives them instant gratification, right? It gives them, a sense of self-esteem. You can watch a movie. When you watch the movie, you think as you're watching it, oh, I can do that. I want to be like that. And it's just a movie, but you feel good for a moment. So, this is what happens. And I've taken too long right there. So what I want to do right now is I want to ask you, can you think of a time in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where the whole community was traumatized? The whole community. Trauma, just traumatized. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna get to that one, but that's not the one I was. that wasn't the one I was asking before. That wasn't the one. Nam, Uhud. Right. So if you don't know, what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He gave orders. He gave orders to his companions. He was getting ready to go into a martial combat situation, and he told 40 archers, climb that mountain and stay there. No matter what happens. If we're winning, don't move. If we're losing, don't move. What happened? They moved. All right, they moved. And at that time, the Muslims were winning. They were actually chasing the enemy away from the mountain. And then Khalid ibn al-Walid came around the mountain. Right? There was only about 10 archers left. He killed them, with his forces, and then came up from behind the Muslims. And so the Muslims were, and then the people they were chasing turned around. Khalid ibn al-Walid is coming from behind them. They're sandwiched in the middle, right? So the first thing to understand about this situation is the trauma, self-inflicted. Because many times we'll have, especially youth will do things and then we'll say, you did that to yourself. Right? As a way of not helping them. No, Okay. So the first thing is that was self-inflicted trauma. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam lost more than 70 companions on that day. All right? It's not like losing 70 people today in our community. If we lose 70 people in our community, there's a lot of options. You have the welfare office. We have housing authority. There's ways of getting help. In those days, you lose a man, you lost, a serious support. So there's more than 70 of them gone from the community. There are husbands are lost, uncles are lost, brothers are lost, fathers are lost, nephews, etc. lost. They're just gone from the community. All right? And there was all of these different responses. Some of the Sahaba, when they thought that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was killed in the melee, right, in that confusion, some of them became despondent. Like, if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has passed away, I don't want to fight anymore. I don't. What do I care? They became despondent. When a clinician hears that, we know that is a traumatic response. That when you're overcome very quickly by something, you just shut down. You disassociate. All right? So, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could have begun to disparage them. He could have. Who are you? Why did you do that? What is this? Right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him in the Quran how to deal with them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam how to deal with his companions. He said, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. This verse was revealed for the battle of Uhud. It is by the mercy of Allah that you are gentle with them. And wallahi, the first, any clinician will tell you that the first thing that you have to have when you're working with somebody who has been traumatized, compassion. It's the first thing. That's the first thing you have to have. You have to have unrelenting regard for the person in front of you. You have to try to put yourself in their shoes. You have to try to walk that mile that they have walked. Right? When you hear what they're saying, you have to believe them. And so it's amazing to me that 1400 years ago, after the Muslims were traumatized like that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by the mercy of Allah, you're gentle with them. You're gentle with them. And then in the very next verse, he tells them what would happen if he was not gentle with them. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were hard and harsh with them, they would have fled from around you. Now, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about? Who's he talking about? He's talking about people who know Allah. They know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They know he's the messenger of Allah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting him know, if you're hard and harsh with them, even though they have iman, they will just run away from you. Now just pause for a moment and think about our youth. If we're hard and harsh with them, they're going to flee from around us. You know, all across the country right now, Muslims are buying churches. All across the country. Why? Because the youth did not buy in. It's not being passed to the next generation. You think that can't happen to Muslims? You think that Muslims can't lose mosques because the youth don't buy in? If we're hard and harsh with them, they will flee from around us. We have to really think deeply about how we're going to correctly transmit Islam to the next generation. And we have to, because we're dealing with things that humanity has never dealt with before, we have to come up with solutions that maybe we've never seen before. Okay? So now let's drop it down to an individual level. when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. Well, first let me ask you this. When you think of someone who was just shaja'an, he was courageous, no one messed with him, who do you think of from the seerah? Umar ibn al-Khattab, right? Everybody, right? What do we say about him? What did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say about him? He said, when Umar radiallahu anhu, when he goes down a pathway, shaitan finds a different path. Simple as that. Even shaitan is like, nah, I'm not messing with him. I'm not going to win that one. What else did he tell us? He said that if there was to be a prophet after me, it would be Umar ibn al-Khattab. Not only that, he was one of the Ashara Mubashirin, one of the 10 who was promised paradise. All right? But when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, we see a different Umar radiallahu anhu. The one who came to him to tell him that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, he told him, you're a liar. And if you say it again, I'm going to separate your head from your shoulders. Right? And he went to the masjid and he was telling everyone, it's a lie, it's a lie. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq had a totally different response for different reasons, but he comes because he lived in a further neighborhood, but he comes to his daughter, Aisha radiallahu anha. He sees that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had actually passed away. He kissed him and said, may you be blessed in this, may you be blessed in the next life as you were blessed in this life. He makes a long dua and everything. Then he goes out to the masjid and he begins to tell the people, no, it's true. Umar radiallahu anhu is worked up. He has a crowd around him. Now, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq does something that when I read that, I'm like, wow, right? Like this is true psychology. He goes to Umar ibn al-Khattab and he tells him, sit down. First he tells him, Umar, be quiet. And then he tells him, Umar, sit down. And this is one of the things that the clinician tries to do with a client when they're really worked up. You want to try to get their body calm so they can learn how to sit with that discomfort. They can learn how to sit with that pain. One of the things that you have to try and do with a client is you want to make you try to make him emotionally flexible. This is what Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was trying to do to Umar ibn al-Khattab. He was telling him, sit down. Umar, be quiet. Umar radiallahu anhu wouldn't listen. So Umar went to the other side of the masjid and he began reciting the verse from the Quran. Right? وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا الرَّسُولُ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is but a messenger. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. There have been messengers before him. There's messengers who passed away before him. Finally, Umar ibn al-Khattab hears him. He hears what Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is saying. And in his own words, what does he tell us? When I heard what Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was saying, it was as if that was the first time I heard that ayah. He heard it before, but it was as if that was the first time he heard it. And then he knew it was true. And what happened? He passed out. He said, my legs ceased to hold me up. And we know Umar was big. One of the traditions calculates that he's, in calculation, that he's about 6'6", big guy. Almost like our sheikh here, mashallah. How tall are you, sheikh? 6, oh, Umar was a big guy.
I would have died.
Right? So, that is a traumatic response. Now, who can go and tell Umar ibn al-Khattab there's something wrong with your iman? I wish you would. I wish you would. Who can say to the other Sahaba that there's something wrong with their iman? No, they're still human beings and they suffer traumatic responses. Wallahi, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, we have so many narrations of the different Sahaba, the changes that they went through. Aisha radiallahu anha, she tells us that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, Fatima Zahra, his daughter, never had a full smile after that. She said, I never saw Fatima radiallahu anha smile, a full smile after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. Bilal ibn Rabah stopped calling the adhan. He left and went to Syria because it was too painful to remember the days of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's so many narrations about what they experienced. That's trauma, y'all. That's trauma. So it hurts me when I hear people say that something's wrong with the iman of someone because they haven't recovered from their trauma. It hurts me. I'm like, you don't understand. You don't understand. Right? It goes deeper than that. And I'm not saying that iman is not a force of healing. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that these different Sahaba had people around them to help them overcome it. And then Umar ibn al-Khattab went on to become one of the most notable figures in history. He set up the postal system. He did all of these different things after he became the Khalif. Right? He went on to become, Michael Hart in his book, I think Umar ibn al-Khattab was like number 6 or number 7 out of the 100 most influential figures in history. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was first, but Umar ibn al-Khattab is like number 6 or number 7. Why? Because he processed that trauma and went on to use it for good. And that's what we have to do with each other in our communities. All right? So we have to set up these places and spaces where our youth and sometimes even their parents can get the help that they need. They can get the support that they need. All right? Yeah. Okay, I promise. I'm almost finished. You know? Okay. I'm cutting out a lot. I don't want to bore you. All right? If people don't learn how to process pain, if people don't learn how to sit with that pain, because you have to sit with it in order to process it. As therapists, we say, if you cannot feel it, you cannot heal it. All right? So there's people who disassociate. I remember one time I had a client and she said to me, sometimes when I hear about bad things that happen to bad people, when I hear bad things that have happened to good people, I don't care. She was admitting, when I hear that, I immediately know this is a traumatic response. This is a traumatic response. How? Because when bad things happen to you, you must disassociate from your feelings. You must disassociate from your authentic self in order to keep engaging the world. If you don't take time to reconnect to your feelings, if you don't take time to come back to yourself, to begin to have optimal psychological functioning, because you're cut off from your feelings, when things happen to other people, you don't feel that either. Many times. All right? So this is what happens a lot of times. The reason why, people, they don't have sympathy. They don't have any empathy for what I just read a statement the other day, and it said something like that privilege is help me, someone, help me. What was it about privilege? You didn't see the statement? Something about having privilege. Like privilege is when something happens and it doesn't affect you, so you don't care, or something to that effect.
Can I get some privilege?
Right? And so this can actually be a traumatic response also. It's not always privilege, right? This can be a traumatic response. Trauma can lead to dysfunctional thinking, right? Black and white thinking. You might have someone, they just have black and white thinking. You're wondering, well, how is this person like this? Right? Like either they're my friends or they're my enemies. And you have to be like, no. They can be workmates, they can be classmates, they can be associates, right? There's a whole range of what people are to you. But black and white thinking is dysfunctional thinking, all right? And a lot of times it comes from trauma. Sometimes irrational fear, irrational grief. Usually that's because something else has not been processed. Something else is going on with the person, all right? I'll just tell you the story real quick. And then inshallah, I'll wrap it up. One time I was at, I do counseling at UCLA. And, one time I had a young lady, she came into my office and she said, she was, like struggling to put back on the hijab and everything. And this is very common, amongst the youth. But I began to listen to her story and she was kind of telling me what was happening. And so basically what happened was from the time she was born up until the time she was about 11 years old, when she began to, have her cycle, things was laissez-faire between her and her parents. But at the age of 11, it was like, no, you must wear the hijab, and if you don't, Allah will be displeased with you, and you can no longer do X, Y, and Z, and and so she began to have this transactional relationship with her religion. But in reality, she never had a relationship with the religion. She only had her parents' relationship with the religion. And her parents was putting on her, all of this, if you don't pray, you're going to the fire. If if you take off your hijab, you're going to the fire. If it was just like, okay, it's inevitable, I'm going to the fire. So I might as well do it my way if I'm going to the fire. So once she got to college, she just was like, I'm done with it. I'm done with all of it. So she had an extreme reaction to extreme pressure from her parents. So she comes to the campus and just wows out, which introduces her to a new type of trauma. Because now she's in these environments where people are going to take advantage of her. She's going to pick the wrong friends, right? Because she doesn't know how to self-regulate. Now she begins self-medicating with alcohol and different things that's on campus. And it all stems back to when she was 11 years old. So you may think that she's reacting to her present situation. She's not. She's reacting to when she was 11 up to her present time. All right? So sometimes, and I'm saying this to you because, sometimes we unwittingly, a lot of times parents want good for their kids, they do. But unwittingly, they pass on their trauma, they pass on their misunderstandings, etc. So I'll end with this. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. There's no hardship, there's no affliction that is going to afflict you except by the permission of Allah. This sums up trauma right here. If it's coming, it's coming. It's coming. There's nothing, it's coming. Any musibah, if it comes, only by the permission of Allah. Doesn't mean that Allah is pleased with it, but it does mean that He allowed it. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ. Very next verse. وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِي قَلْبَهُ. Whoever believes in Allah, Allah guides his heart. So on one hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, musibah's coming, right? When it comes, it's by the permission of Allah. But if you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in other words, now this is where the qadr comes in, right? Because qadr, understanding qadr, that what is for you is for you, it cannot escape you. And if it's not for you, no matter what you do, you'll never get it, right? You have to believe that. And if you do, Allah, He will guide your heart. And so one of my teachers was explaining to us that this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes your tragedy and turns it into triumph. You've got to overcome that obstacle. There's a wisdom there, right? By understanding this trial is for you. It was tailor-made for you. Nobody leaves this life without some type of trial, some type of tribulation, right? In Surah Al-Mulk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ. He created death and life to try you. أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ أَمَلًا. Which of you, in other words, the implication is this: death and life, trials and tribulations. Despite those trials and tribulations, can you still have some ihsan in your actions? Can you still have sabr? Will you still make tawbah? Will you still have reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Can you still have husn al-dhann billah? Can you still have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despite the hardship that you have? This is the implication. Right? So when it comes, it was for you. Whether you brought it on yourself or someone else, it was your child or your workmate or the guy who ran into your car on the street or whatever, that's for you. Despite that, can you still have good actions? Can you still put into practice those spiritual virtues? And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. That your tragedy turns into triumph. Right? That your chaos turns into clarity. That your misfortune becomes the message. It becomes help for other people. And with that, I'll pause right there and see if there are any questions, inshallah.
Anybody has a question back here? I'll read some.
Bismillah.
No, that's okay.
She has the mic now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
That was a very excellent talk, brother. I was taking notes, and I have I have some things to ask you. Could you give us an idea about black and white thinking? Because as Muslims, if we were with non-Muslims and they do bad things, we can't help but say, all right, they're out of here. That's black and white thinking, but I don't know if it's from a dysfunctional source. It's just that you don't want to be with somebody who's like trying to promote homosexuality, that kind of thing. That's an example. The other thing is, what can you say about narcissism? Where does that fit into all of this? Because that's really widespread these days and a big problem. And the last thing I'm going to tell you is a concept of trauma and rebound resilience. Your ability to rebound to where you were, and actually in some cases, with God's help, to be better than you were when you got injured. And I'll let you answer.
I think she has all the questions for the evening. Inshallah, we'll be here for another hour, mashallah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Oh, mashallah.
I mean, there's plenty of tea. So.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start with the last question. The thing about resilience, right, is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained this to us, right? He explained to us that the believer moves with the wind, right? He says that, that the believer is like the palm tree that sways in the wind. He's not like the oak tree that stands up straight and when the wind blows, it just knocks him over. So the ulama, they explain that the winds is like the hard times. The hard times are coming. When the hard times come, you go along with it. You have this emotional flexibility. You have this psychological flexibility, right? That's called resilience. All right? Now, the problem is resilience starts at the age of our youngsters right here running around right now. We have to help our children to be resilient. We have to, I mean, there's a lot of different things that are said in the mental health books about, helping people to develop resilience. But most of them, they talk about in the stages of childhood. Trauma is one of those things that will weigh heavily against a person developing resilience. Because the thing about trauma is you feel like you're by yourself. That's the thing about trauma. Right? So even in our tradition, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us, you have to learn how to be flexible with those hard times. And so as our children are young, when they go through things, we have to remind them, right? This is, Allah, He allowed it. All right? You have to pick yourself up and you have to dust yourself off and keep going in a soft, gentle way, compassionate way, right? There's a lot of different ways of helping them to be resilient, okay? Okay, help me with the next question. What was the one before it?
About how does narcissism fit into all of that?
Most narcissists have some type of trauma. That's the irony, right? Most narcissists, they can only see themselves, right? They can't see the harm that they're causing you. And so they do a lot of, they do a lot of what we call gaslighting. They dismiss your pain. They lower your, they tell you that what you're experiencing is false. Right? They minimize, your pain, your suffering, your experience, because it's all about them. Many times this is because of trauma, right? And so, and how that happens is that's exactly what happened to them. Their pain was dismissed, So what they're trying to do is they're trying to use you to heal their wounds. That's what's happening many times. Now it might not be, so if it's a psychological wound, but it could be a spiritual, amrad al-qalb. It can be a disease of the heart, right? Where a person they just have, it could be ujub, which is like they're just amazed with themselves, right? So that when a person is amazed with themselves, they can't see anyone else. That's if they have some type of vanity, all right, which eventually grows into arrogance. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that arrogance is that, number one, you don't accept the truth. And number two, you see others as beneath you. So, they need the correct diagnosis. Is this something spiritual, that is crusting over their heart? Or is this something psychological? It's rooted in some type of trauma or neglect. And as far as black and white thinking, I'm not talking about those things that are right, that are clear for us as Muslims, halal and haram. I'm not speaking about that, right? But even with that, we have to be compassionate. We have to be, I'm not saying accepting. I'll give you an example. All right. And this is what we call in mental health, we call this reframing. All right. Or you can call it motivational interviewing. Somebody comes with you with something, your heart rejects it. But you don't have to be hard and harsh with them. You give them, you reframe it for them so they can understand it in a different way, right? You help them, you use their worldview. Thank you. Use their worldview to teach them something. I'll give you an example. A young man came into the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is surrounded by his companions. And the young man asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the doorway of the masjid, he's at the doorway, and he says, Ya Rasulullah, give me permission to commit zina. Zina. intimate relations without being married. The companions were like, uskut, shut up. Shut up. Boy, what's wrong with you? Meh, meh. Be quiet. Not Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he could have. How do you ask this question? Didn't you know the verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْرِبُوا الزِّنَا. You don't even approach this, right? So this young man, at the end of the hadith, he tells us that this was the most beloved thing to him. Zina. So what do we know, right? I'm speaking as a therapist. I would say that he had a sex addiction, right? He was addicted. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dealt with him from his worldview. So he calls him. Despite the companions, the companions are always like defending Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So he calls him. He tells him, come, sit down in front of him. The young man sits down in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he begins asking him a series of questions. He says, do you have a mother? He said, yes, Ya Rasulullah. He said, do you want someone to do this with your mother? He said, no, Ya Rasulullah. Rasulullah said, people are like that. They don't want this done with their mothers. And then he asked him the same question. Do you have a sister? Do you have an aunt? Do you have a daughter? Do you want them to do this with your female relatives? Every time the man was like, Wallahi, Ya Rasulullah, la, I don't want this, Ya Rasulullah, not for my family. And so at the end of the dua, at the end of the conversation, Rasulullah made dua for him. All right? He made dua. But what I'm trying to show you is that Rasulullah did not go in on him because that wasn't his understanding, it wasn't his frame of reference, it wasn't his worldview. Rasulullah knew, he diagnosed him correctly. There's people out here walking around, we have to diagnose them correctly. Their kufr has blinded them. And many times, they don't have another worldview. We have to be very compassionate. We have to be very understanding on how we help to reframe what they're trying to feed us so they can see it from our point of view. And that's what Rasulullah did. And this is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmed. And there's more than one hadith scholar that said that this is, some say it's sahih, some say it's hasan. It's sound. It can be used as proof. Right? And so that's what I would say. So black and white thinking, as I was speaking about it, comes, we're talking about a normal person would understand that there's a spectrum, right? That it could be this, 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 right? But when a person has psychological diminishment, normally because of trauma or neglect, they only see the poles. They don't see the spectrum. They see this and this. And it's the job of the therapist to show them the spectrum. So that's how I was using it. You're welcome.
Oh,
It's good.
anybody else have a question? I think I just scared your son to death. I pointed to him. I'll do Ahmed. I'll come to you.
So my question is how to differentiate between healing and suppressing your feelings.
Suppression, how you know that it's suppression, is that every now and then it comes back. It comes back up. You're always having to push it down. You can't be yourself. You can't say it like it is, or you can't cry over it. You can't deal with it. When you think about it, it causes you shame. When you think about it, it causes you pain because it's suppressed. And anything that is suppressed, it's like on a spring. It's going to keep coming up. Think about a physical wound. If you don't take care of it, it's going to remind you that it needs to be taken care of. It's going to give you pain. It's going to give you pus. It's going to give you blood. It's going to let you know. It's going to send you messengers. Hey, we need some help over here. Psychological pain is the same way. It's going to keep coming up. It's going to keep reminding you. We haven't dealt with this yet. Whereas healing, right? You'll be able to sit with the event without the shame, without the pain, without the, without the fear of it just popping up out of nowhere, right? You will be able to think about it. You'll be able to talk about it. You'll be able to help other people with that similar thing without the pain. So you can either operate from the wound or you can operate from the scar. See, once it's healed, it's a scar. You remember it, but it doesn't cause you any pain. When it's a wound, it's going to cause you pain. Just to think about it. And when you think about it, you're going to push it back down. I'm going to keep driving. I don't even think about that. But it's begging to be dealt with. That's the difference. Mm-hmm.
Jazakumullah khair. I would like, my question is a bit complicated, but I would like to simplify it. There is in spirituality in this time, in our generation and this we know that there is a huge gap in spirituality, but if we look at it from a point of that, one of the why are we psychologically vulnerable is because of the amount of luxury we're living we have seen, and we find that so many we like with maybe like if I hit like this and I feel like, oh, that's very hurtful, I need somebody to pamper me or comfort me. So I'm not sure if I'm making this clear, because I think we live in time where there is like so much luxury, so much pampering, so much, and subhanAllah, one of the things, maybe the many lessons that we learn from what happened to people of Gaza is that the luxury that we live in this time, and how does this reflect on our like overall like problems and deep profound problems.
Wallahi, I agree with you. I mean, I think you said it perfectly, right? The softness has the softness of life has made us vulnerable. And I'm not saying that just because I think that, right? If you read the section on Imam Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin on raising children, that's one of the things he says. Don't always let them sleep on a soft bed, right? Like let them experience some hard, right? Imam Tabarani, rahimahullah, great Imam of Hadith. Some of his students was asking him, because you memorize 100,000 Hadith. How do you memorize 100,000 Hadith, right? They said, "Ya Imam, how did you do this?" And he said, "By sleeping on reed mats for 30 years. And I was in Egypt last year, and I was with this sheikh, amazing sheikh. He's memorized Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, all of the 6 books of Hadith, plus the Muwatta of Imam Malik, memorized. And he wins the Hadith competition wherever he goes, right? And he was explaining to me that now the difference between him and what he went through to reach that, and the students that are coming now, he's like, they're soft, right? Like they're not willing to stay up late at night. They're on their phones. You know what I mean? He said, I see all of these students of knowledge come to Egypt and they spend out all night eating different types of food, right? They don't restrict themselves. So I'm not saying it because that's what I think, I'm saying that because if you just look at the literature, that's what they all say. Like, if you have to go against the pleasures, you have to go against the nafs. You cannot give them everything that they desire. They will only lead you astray. So wallahi, I agree with you, right? And so we have to But still, I think we have to be wise about how we introduce this to our children, how we introduce this, right? How we, in other words, so that it's not abusive, but it's actually productive,
Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum and jazakallah khairan. My question might be a little weird, so please bear with me on that. I'd recently heard the statement, this guy was talking and said, when women talk about their problems, it helps them feel better. But when men talk about their problems, it doesn't. In fact, if anything, it makes them feel worse. And I'm finding that more true for myself as a man, that the more I talk about my problems, it doesn't really help me anymore, at least. So would like to hear your thoughts and as well.
I think sometimes we're after different things, right? I mean, I have 5 daughters. I have a wife. I have a mother. Right? I'm sorry. I have 4 daughters. Right? I have 4 daughters and 1 son. And I just noticed that many times that the ladies, and you can correct me, I'm not an expert on this, right? I'm not going to claim that. But I just noticed that many times when the ladies speak, they're speaking for connection. And they arrive at that. They connect to the person that they're speaking to. And this is the reason why they're not speaking just no. They're trying to connect, and they need you to say, oh yeah, I get it, I understand, yeah. Right? Because of the connection. Whereas we connect in a different way. Allah has wired us a completely different way. Our connection is different. We don't need a lot of speaking to connect, right? Yeah, say it once, say it twice, but to keep rehashing it, is almost like mentioning the trauma, but getting no healing. You need more than just talk therapy. Now for men, we've got to actually go and do something about it. Right? That's our nature. It's like, okay, this is what it is. This is the problem. Okay. And our natural next step is, all right, look, make it happen. You know what I mean? We're going to do a bunch of talking, but we have to understand, how Allah made them, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Please, I'm not, and we have to facilitate that, for each other. That's what I believe. Yeah. I'm on the hot seat, boy.
As mentioned at the beginning of the speak about the phone.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to mention when you start about the khutbah or speak about the phone. So unfortunately, everybody attached to the phone. And unfortunately too, the new generation also, they're more attached than us. And sometimes there's an influence, sometimes good and sometimes bad. So I don't know how we can control that.
In 60 words or less. In 120 characters or less.
Okay. So there's a reason why. Okay. I go to these conferences where they pay huge amounts of money to psychologists to help create the apps that attract the attention of the children. They put super shades of color, the different dimensions of sound. They do this because they want to win the hearts of the children. All right? We have to create our own social media. We have to create our own apps. We have to create our own, right? We can't just be blind followers. I think that's just part of it, right? I think another part of it is that there has to be a certain level of mujahada. Has to be, right? There has to be, in the house, the parents.
For those who don't know the meaning of mujahada.
Mujahada, like spiritual struggle, right? Struggling against the self. There has to be a level of, yes, it is lawful, but more harm can come from it. So it's better to stay away from it. And again, that's on the parents. The parents have to be like, no, you're not getting a phone until you're at least 15, 16, right? You're not getting a phone. Or I'm gonna get you a flip phone. It is what it is. It is what it is.
If you're getting a flip phone, you might as well just keep that joke. Save your $30, man.
Right? And none of us have all of the answers. Like, we're all working on it at the time, you know what I mean? But what we do at Lamps of Light is, like, once it reaches an extreme, then we try to, come in and give behavioral interventions. That's what we try to do. Yeah, 15.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So you were talking about how certain events or things people might go through might lead them to be a certain way, to have a certain personality, or have certain struggles. If we see that in people that we love, that maybe certain events that they've had in the past, sometimes like coming over to the United States of America could have been a traumatic event, but how do we have, mostly the adults in the family, the elders, speak about it, open up about it when they're really closed off to talking about it? How do we get them to even think about going to therapy for it, or even at least talk about it to us?
Yeah. That's a little bit that's more difficult. So this is what I'll say. Usually, like, when it comes to working with families, I see two extremes, and this has to do with dealing with trauma. It has to do with having addictions, things like that. I see two extremes. On one extreme, I see that the helper, for example, is just like, there's they just let them do whatever they want to do, act however they want to act. They don't set any boundaries, and they just accept everything, right? And so that's what we call enabling. You're part of the problem. And then all the way on the other side of the spectrum is there's this, always, just shutting them out, closing them down, telling them that everything is wrong with them, right? People will refuse to see the truth unless it is accompanied by compassion. They will refuse. No one, listen, we say it in English like this. We all love chocolate. We don't want to shove down our throat, right? And so there's this middle ground that has to happen. There's this middle ground, right?
Wow.
Yes, mashallah.
Yeah. Talk about product placement. MashaAllah.
Right?
Yeah,
Right.
Check us in the mail, bro. Check us in the mail.
Right? There's this, you got to come, we can't function at the extremes. We have to come to the middle, and it's like this. I see that you're struggling, right? I see that you're going through something. I see that you're suffering. I see, that you need some help. Now, it's not my burden to carry, right? Like I can't carry that. But if you want some help for that, right? When you're ready, I will help you as much as I can. But stay away from the extremes, just completely enabling them or completely just turning away from them, shutting them down, shutting them out. But it's like, listen, I recognize this. I see that there's an issue here. I believe this would be beneficial for you. If you want to do it, I will help you and I will support you. And you can walk the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. And so that's what I would say.
Well, I think I'll have a little mercy on our brother here because he's been on the discount rack now for about 90 minutes. This is supposed to be a half an hour. Joint. He said, hey, man, I ain't never coming back to this place
No,
again, man.
Wallahi, I love it. I love it
You
here.
know, it's a union job.
It's just nobody invited me.
I'll talk to the shop steward, inshallah. Make sure that they, have mercy on you next time. So I have one little comment of myself, and it's conditional that inshallah you come back.
I know.
Right.
So I know I have the khutbah here. Maybe when next month, or is it?
I don't know, but since I got you on the gram and YouTube, I just want to put it publicly that it's conditional that inshallah you come back to continue this conversation. In that I feel like our community has become like a old iPod where you just hit shuffle play and you don't listen to the whole album. Or like you're from my generation where you used to have actual vinyl and read the liner notes, right? We don't go in depth on anything. So this was an extremely intriguing and enriching conversation, but I also feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Yes, that's true.
And that next time I promise 45 minutes, one and done, in and out, inshallah, protein style.
Well, I don't care about the time. Honestly, me personally, like I came and
even if we stayed another 5 hours, it still would be scratching the surface.
As long as you have a sleeping bag here, you have a sleeping bag.
Inshallah. I'tikaf will just stay until So my comment is framed within that. Inshallah, you come back and please continue to teach and enlighten us on this extremely important conversation. And so I was also furiously taking notes on my phone and writing 1,000 things down. And so very briefly to end is that you touched really quickly on the idea of authenticity and the importance of that in what we are going to bestow to our children. And for those of you, that sit in my tafsir class, you know that I'm a word nerd. So I like to go into the etymology, and the roots of words. And so there is a very important etymological link in terms of the root meanings of the words between authenticity and authority. And that idea that if we want our kids to grow up to be Muslim, to be, confidently Muslim, not perfect, but with the sensibility that this is my deen, my set of obligations to do my best in this life to obey Allah Ta'ala, to follow His Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, and so forth, then the authenticity is the thing that would give us and our children the authority to do that. And I would love for you to come back, inshallah, not to answer that now, but to come back, we don't need to have another heart attack here at Middle Ground, so we're going to send you home right now, inshallah. But I would love for you to come back and maybe explore that idea of, because I feel like some of what we talked about is how do we cultivate internal authority within people to overcome, deal with their traumas, these other, dealing with the influences that in many ways what we're talking about is people are deficient in internal authority.
Yes.
Right? And that's what's going to allow you to, that's what is going to allow you to reject the nafs for the pleasure of Allah. That's great as like a kind of abstract, but I would love for you to come back, inshallah, and have a conversation. Perhaps, Amin could join us and we could have like a three-way conversation, take a little bit off of you, and you can punch out early. We'll stay and mop up. We'll close up the shop, inshallah.
I actually forgot that I actually was going to call him up and ask him some questions, but I forgot. So please next time, inshallah.
So please come back and see us again,
inshallah.
And may Allah Ta'ala reward you, all of the people, the staff, and everybody working with you, inshallah, give you tawfiq, give you fath, inshallah, make you a means, inshallah, for people, for healing, and may Allah Ta'ala make it a resource and a mirath, may He make it a inheritance for our community when we are all gone, that will continue as a light, as is named after your organization, that will be gone long after us, inshallah. So jazakumullahu khairan for coming tonight. Wa nasallahu al-afiyah wal maghfirah, inshallah, wa salawatuhu wa salamuhu ala nabiyhi al-kareem wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
جزاكم الله خير.
وإياكم
Alhamdulillah.
وإياكم.
Habibi. Alhamdulillah.
الحمد لله.
Appreciate you, man.
Alhamdulillah, man.
That was long-winded, man. It was supposed to be a jam session, man. Like recording the whole album.
No, but I love this. MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. وإياكم وإياكم. جزاك الله خير. الحمد
We'll see you
لله.
inshallah around.
إن شاء الله.